I didn't find out my brother was suing me from a lawyer. I found out from a text that said, "You know that cabin was never really yours." No hello, no warning. Just that sentence sitting on my phone at 9:14 p.m., glowing against a dark kitchen. The dishwasher hummed behind me. A single overhead light buzzed. I remember tightening my grip on the counter because my knees went loose, like my body understood the threat before my brain did. I stared at the message. Then the next one came in. "Dad says we're done asking." That was the second something in me snapped. If you've ever had family treat you like you don't matter, like your work, your sacrifice, your years mean nothing, the moment they want something hit, like subscribe and stay with me. Because what they tried to take from me wasn't just property. It was the last illusion I had left. My name is Brooke Ellison. I'm 35 years old. I live in Austin, Texas. And the cabin my younger brother was trying to claim sat 2 hours west, tucked into the hill country, overlooking a strip of water so still it looked fake. I paid for it myself. Every dollar, every transfer, every signature. For 10 years, I built my life the boring way. No shortcuts, no bailouts, no family help. I worked my way up from junior analyst to product lead, slept on a mattress on the floor of a 700-square-foot apartment, ate the same 3 meals on rotation, and tracked my savings in a spreadsheet labeled exit. Not dream, not vacation. Exit. That cabin wasn't a trophy. It was a door. The night those texts came in, I was still wearing my work clothes. Blazer slung over a chair. Heels kicked under the table. My phone buzzed again. "Caleb, you don't want this to get ugly." I laughed. A short, empty sound. The kind you make when something is so insane your body rejects it. I typed back one sentence. "File it." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then my phone rang. Dad didn't say my name when I answered. "The cabin belongs to Caleb," he said, voice flat, practiced. "You were never meant to keep it." The dishwasher clicked off. Silence rushed in. "I bought it," I said. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. Dad exhaled through his nose the way he always did when I annoyed him. "You were holding it." That's different. Different. That word had followed me my entire life. Different when I got straight A's and Caleb barely passed. Different when I paid my own tuition and he got a check. Different when I left home and he never really did. "You're being selfish," my mother cut in softly, taking the phone from him. "Think about your brother." There it was, the line she'd used since I was 12. Think about your brother. I thought about him every day of my childhood. I thought about him when my achievements were ignored, when my savings vanished, when I learned to stop asking questions because the answers always hurt. "I am thinking about him," I said, "and about me." Her voice hardened. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." That was the moment I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. They had already decided. I was just late to the meeting. The next morning, my phone exploded. Not from my family, from strangers. Someone had posted screenshots of the cabin listing online. Someone else tagged my company. A long Facebook post started circulating under my brother's name, talking about promises broken and inheritance stolen. I read the comments while brushing my teeth. Gold digger, heartless, family thief. The mirror reflected a woman with toothpaste on her lip and bloodshot eyes who looked nothing like the villain they were inventing. By noon, HR emailed me asking to connect briefly. By 2, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Franklin Moss representing your brother." So that's how they chose to do it. Not a conversation, not a question. A lawsuit. I drove out to the cabin that Friday, alone. The road narrowed as the city fell away. The sky widened. I rolled the windows down and let the wind hit my face hard enough to sting. The place looked exactly the same as the day I signed the papers. Cedar siding, wide porch, one light on inside glowing like a held breath. I stepped out of the car and stood there for a full minute, keys heavy in my palm. This was mine. I'd earned this quiet. I walked inside, flicked on the lights, set my bag down. The house smelled faintly of pine and lemon cleaner. I kicked off my shoes, crossed the living room barefoot, and froze. The back door was unlocked. I knew it. Deep in my chest, I knew it before I checked. The lock was turned, clean, intentional. I didn't touch anything. I stepped back outside and called the sheriff. By the time the deputy arrived, my hands were steady. He took notes, checked the door, asked if I wanted to file a report. Yes, I said. I do. As he walked back to his cruiser, my phone rang again. Mom. I let it ring, then a text. Why are you doing this to us? I stared at the screen. The sun dipped lower, turning the water bronze. Doing this to us. Not why are you scared, not what happened, not are you okay. Just us. I typed one last message. I didn't start this. Her reply came fast. You finished it. I stood on the porch until the light faded, the quiet pressing in from all sides. Somewhere inside the house, a floorboard creaked as it cooled. That night, lying in a bed I'd paid for, in a house they wanted to take, I finally understood the truth I'd spent decades avoiding. I was never their daughter first. I was their resource. And the moment I said no, I became the enemy. The next morning, my mother called one last time. Her voice was calm, too calm. We expect you to cooperate, she said. If you don't, you'll leave us no choice. I stared out at the water, still as glass. Then make it, I said. There was a pause, a sharp inhale. You've always been difficult, she said. This is why people leave you. The line went dead. That was the sound of a door closing, and I didn't try to open it again. I learned early that silence was safer than honesty. In our house, noise belonged to Caleb. His laugh, his anger, his wants. Mine were background static. I was 9 the first time I understood it clearly, not intellectually, in my body. We were standing in the kitchen of our old place outside San Marcos, yellow linoleum, a clock that ticked too loud. I held a certificate from school, first place in the district math competition. I'd folded it carefully, edges aligned so it wouldn't wrinkle on the bus ride home. Dad was at the table checking his phone. Mom was rinsing dishes. I said I won something today. Neither of them looked up. Caleb burst in from the backyard dirt on his knees, waving a broken slingshot. Dad, I hit the fence again. Dad laughed. Loud, proud. That's my boy. I stood there for a full 10 seconds with that paper in my hands, the smile slowly dying on my face. Mom finally glanced over. What is it, Brooke? I won, I said again, softer now. At school. She nodded once, distracted. That's nice, honey. Set it down. Set it down. I did. On the counter, next to the mail. By dinner it was gone. No one mentioned it. Ever. That was the first time I swallowed something that should have been celebrated. It wouldn't be the last. By middle school, I stopped bringing things home. Awards, grades, invitations. I learned to keep my wins small and quiet, like contraband. Caleb, meanwhile, took up space like oxygen was unlimited. When he failed a test, there were explanations. The teacher didn't like him. The material was unfair. He was bored. When I aced one, there was suspicion. Did I cheat? Was it extra credit? Did it really matter? At 14, I got my first part-time job at a grocery store on Route 12, stocking shelves, closing shifts. I liked the hum of the freezers and the way the numbers added up clean in my head. I saved every paycheck, every single one. At 16, I opened my own checking account. Dad insisted on being co-signer, just in case, he said. I didn't argue. I was used to being told what was just in case. One afternoon, I came home early and found Mom and Caleb in the living room whispering. My debit card sat on the coffee table. Not where I'd left it. Mom jumped when she saw me. We borrowed some money. Borrowed. No question. No warning. Caleb didn't even look ashamed. I needed it. For what I asked. Dad appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. Don't start. I didn't. I learned something instead. I learned my money wasn't mine if they decided it wasn't. I worked more hours, took more shifts, put a cash in an envelope taped behind a loose panel in my closet. I stopped trusting anything with my name on it. College was my exit plan. I applied quietly. Scholarships, grants, anything that didn't require asking. The acceptance letter came on a Thursday. I read it alone in my room, heart pounding so hard my ears rang. I pressed the paper to my chest and sat on the floor until the feeling passed. At dinner, I told them. Dad chewed slowly. Austin's far. "I'll manage," I said. Mom nodded. "What about Caleb?" Caleb was 15, perfectly fine, already taller than me. "He'll miss you," she said. I didn't say what I wanted to say, that he barely noticed me when I was standing right there. The night before I left, Mom hugged me stiffly. Dad patted my shoulder like I was a coworker. Caleb didn't come to my send-off. I didn't look back when I drove away. Austin was hard, lonely, glorious. I shared apartments with strangers, slept on couches, ate ramen standing over the sink. I learned to code until my eyes burned, took unpaid internships, said yes when it hurt. Every time I wanted to quit, I pictured the look on my mother's face when she said, "Think about your brother." So I thought about him, and I kept going. After graduation, I sent home a photo of me holding my diploma. No reply. A week later, Dad texted asking if I could spot Caleb some money. He was figuring things out. I sent nothing. That was the first boundary I ever set. It felt like treason. The years blurred together, promotions, late nights, coffee gone cold on my desk. I moved up because I was reliable, because I didn't complain, because I didn't need praise. By 30, I stopped calling home. They didn't notice. The cabin idea came during a week when I hadn't spoken to another human outside of work in days. I was exhausted, hollow. I didn't want luxury. I wanted quiet, a place no one else could claim. Somewhere my name meant something because it was on the deed. I saved like my life depended on it. When I finally bought it, I didn't tell them. Not out of spite, out of instinct. Something in me knew. And when the lawsuit came when my brother said I'd stolen what was his, it didn't shock me. It confirmed what I'd always felt but never said out loud. I had been invisible to them unless I was useful. That night after Mom's last call, I sat alone on the cabin porch, knees pulled to my chest, listening to insects buzz in the dark. I wasn't crying. I was cataloging. Every slight, every silence, every time they chose him and told me it was love. By the time the sun came up, I wasn't sad anymore. I was clear. And clarity, I would learn, is far more dangerous than anger. The public part started on a Tuesday. Not with a bang, with a notification. I was in a glass conference room on the 12th floor, marker in hand, halfway through explaining a rollout timeline when my phone vibrated against the table. Once. Then again. Then it wouldn't stop. I didn't look at it until the meeting ended. I should have looked sooner. By the time I stepped into the hallway, my screen was a wall of red. Missed calls, mentions, messages from numbers I didn't recognize, a Slack DM from someone I barely knew at work. "Hey, are you okay? I just saw something." I opened Instagram. At the top of my feed was my brother's face. Caleb had posted a video 30 minutes earlier, shot in our parents' living room. Same couch, same crooked family photo on the wall behind him. He wore a gray hoodie, sleeves pulled over his hands, eyes already glassy. The caption read, "When your own sister steals your future." I watched the first 10 seconds with the sound off. That was enough to tell he'd rehearsed it. Then I turned the volume up. "I never wanted to do this publicly," he said, voice trembling on cue. "But I don't have a choice." He paused, swallowed, looked down, looked back at the camera. My grandparents always told me the family place would be mine. Everyone knew that. And now my sister, who hasn't spoken to us in years, goes behind our backs and takes it. Takes it. He held up photos of the cabin. My photos. Screenshots I'd sent privately. He zoomed in on the porch, the water, the deed number visible in one frame if you knew where to look. "She used money that was meant for all of us," he continued. And when I asked her about it, she told me to file a lawsuit. He laughed weakly like the idea broke his heart. The comments were already out of control. "That's disgusting. Blood is blood. Expose her." I scrolled my thumb numb. Someone had tagged my company. Someone else posted my LinkedIn profile. A third had found the county listing and pasted the address in the comments like a trophy. My phone buzzed again. "Dad, you need to stop this now." I didn't reply. Within an hour, the video was shared into local groups. Texas Family Drama, Hill Country Watch. The story mutated as it spread. By lunchtime, I was no longer a sister who bought a cabin. I was a woman who stole from her own blood. At 12:47 p.m., HR emailed me, At 1:03, a reporter from a regional outlet left a voicemail asking for comment on a family inheritance dispute. At 1:19, someone sent a screenshot of a Yelp review on my company's page. If this is how they treat family, imagine how they treat customers. I closed my office door and sat on the floor back against the wall, phone pressed to my knee. This was the part they hadn't needed to say out loud. If they couldn't take the cabin quietly, they'd take my reputation instead. At 3:10 p.m., Mom posted a long paragraph, carefully worded, no accusations, just grief. We raised our children to share, to care for one another. It breaks my heart to see money come between family. The comments filled with sympathy. Prayer emojis, people telling her how strong she was. Not one of them asked where the money had actually come from. By the end of the day, I had been cast. Caleb was the wounded son. My parents were the grieving saints, and I was the cold, ambitious sister who'd chosen property over people. That night, my phone rang. Unknown number. Ms. Ellison, a man said smoothly. This is Franklin Moss. I represent your brother. I didn't sit down. We've advised our client to pursue a civil action, he continued, but there's still time to resolve this privately. By giving him my property, I said. A pause. Paper shuffling. By doing the right thing. I laughed. It surprised both of us. Put it in writing, I said, and hung up. The next morning, the pressure turned physical. I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. Not ringing, just vibrating. Constantly. Like a trapped insect. There were messages from coworkers I barely spoke to, distant relatives, old classmates. Is this true? Tell me your side. Family matters should stay private. I didn't answer any of them. At 10:22 a.m., a security alert popped up on my email. Someone had tried to access my work account from an unfamiliar device. At 11:06, my building manager called asking if I was expecting guests. 2 men came by asking questions, he said they were family friends. I drove out to the cabin again that Friday. I needed to see it, to remind myself it was real. When I pulled into the gravel drive, my stomach dropped. The lights were on. Inside. I killed the engine and sat there, hands locked on the wheel. The front door was closed, but the porch light one I never left on glowed steady. I didn't go inside. I called the sheriff. While I waited, I checked my phone. A new post from Caleb had gone up minutes earlier, a photo of him standing in front of the cabin. My cabin. Captioned, "Coming home." That was the moment the public trial crossed into something else. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about erasing me. The deputy arrived, lights cutting across the trees. He asked me to stay in my car. Knocked. Announced himself. The door opened. Caleb stood there, jaw-tight, hands visible, like he'd practiced that too. "It's my place," he said loudly. "She knows that." The deputy turned to me. "Ma'am," he asked, "is this your property?" "Yes," I said. My voice didn't waver. Caleb stared at me like I'd betrayed him. The deputy asked for paperwork. I handed it over. Clean, clear. Caleb's mouth opened. Closed. He was escorted outside while the deputy took notes. I watched from a few feet away as my brother paced, phone in hand, filming. I didn't look at the camera. I didn't give him anything to use. After the deputy left, I stood alone on the porch, the night thick and buzzing around me. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "You didn't have to humiliate him like this." I stared at the screen. Then I turned the phone face down and walked inside. That night, lying awake in the dark, I finally understood the strategy. They weren't trying to win in court. They were trying to make me lose everywhere else first. And if I wanted to survive what came next, I couldn't keep reacting like a daughter. I would have to start thinking like a defendant, and soon, like a plaintiff. The shift didn't happen when I got angry. It happened when I got quiet. The morning after the sheriff escorted Caleb off the porch, I sat at my kitchen table in Austin with a legal pad and a cup of coffee I forgot to drink. The sun hadn't fully risen. The room was gray. Still. I stopped asking myself how this felt. I started asking what this was, and the answer was simple. It was an attack. So I stopped behaving like a daughter, trying to explain herself, and started behaving like someone whose life was being deliberately dismantled. At 7:42 a.m., I called Tessa Monroe. I didn't get her from Google. I got her from Maya, who'd once whispered her name to me over margaritas like it was contraband. She doesn't posture, Maya had said. She ends things. Tessa picked up on the second ring. I need you to listen, I said. And then I need you to tell me if I'm crazy. She listened, didn't interrupt, didn't gasp, didn't reassure me. When I finished, there was a pause. You're not crazy, she said. You're late. We met that afternoon in her office downtown. 21st floor. Concrete floors. No art on the walls. Just glass steel and quiet. She was 40, maybe 42, hair pulled back tight, navy suit, no jewelry except a watch with a scratched face. She didn't offer me water. She slid a yellow legal pad across the table. Start from the beginning, she said. But skip your feelings. So I did. Dates, accounts, names, amounts, screenshots, messages, the sheriff's report, the attempted account access, the posts, the emails to my company. She wrote while I talked. Fast, clean. When I finished, she looked up. They're not suing you because they think they'll win, she said. They're suing you because they think you'll fold. I nodded. I already knew that part. But here's what they didn't count on. She continued. You kept records. She tapped the pad once. Sharp. Now we find leverage. I handed her the folder I'd brought. Bank statements, old emails, the co-signed checking account documents from when I was 16. She flipped through them without comment. Then she stopped. Where did this money go? She asked, pointing to a withdrawal from years earlier. I don't know, I said. It disappeared. Her eyes lifted slowly. Disappear doesn't exist in finance, she said. It moved. She asked me questions I'd never thought to ask myself. Did your parents manage any accounts on your behalf? Did anyone ever promise you funds that never arrived? Did you receive letters you didn't open or never received at all? I hesitated on that last one. There were supposed to be distributions, I said, from my grandmother, small ones. I never saw them. Tessa didn't smile, but something in her posture sharpened. Call whoever handled your grandmother's affairs, she said. Today. That night I called Elaine Porter, my grandmother's friend. Not a relative, just a woman who used to send birthday cards with real stamps and neat handwriting. She answered on the third ring. Oh, Brooke, she said warmly. I was wondering when you'd call. My chest tightened. Elaine, I said. Did my grandmother ever leave me anything? There was a pause. Long, heavy. Yes, she said. Several times. The silence that followed felt like a vacuum. I never received anything, I said. I know, she replied quietly, because your parents told us you did. My hands went cold. Elaine explained slowly, carefully, how my grandmother had set up a small custodial fund, how letters and checks had been sent, how they'd been told everything was handled. They said you were grateful, Elaine said. They said you didn't want to make a fuss. I closed my eyes. The room tilted, not emotionally, structurally, like a beam had shifted and revealed a fault line. The next morning, Elaine emailed me scanned copies, letters, check stubs. One voided check never cashed. All addressed to me, all intercepted. When I brought the documents to Tessa, she didn't react. She just nodded once. There it is, she said. That's your pivot. She laid it out with clinical calm. Your parents didn't just favor your brother. They diverted assets. They misrepresented distributions. They allowed him to publicly accuse you of theft while knowing you never received what was yours. That's not a family disagreement, she said. That's fraud, and defamation, and interference. She leaned back in her chair. And we are not defending. I felt my pulse spike. We're filing a counterclaim, she continued. We're requesting injunctive relief to shut down the public harassment. We're subpoenaing the account records, and we're naming all three of them. My parents, Caleb, all of them. The word landed heavy. You're going to be painted as cruel, she warned. They'll cry. They'll pray. They'll talk about blood. I nodded. They already are. Tessa stood and walked to the window. They made this public, she said. So we end it publicly, with facts. Over the next week, my life turned into evidence. Screenshots, timestamps, IP addresses, the attempted login, The coordinated posting times, the way Caleb's video went up minutes after my refusal. Patterns. Intent. Maya helped me catalog everything. Late nights, cold pizza, fingers cramped from scrolling. At 2:11 a.m. one night, she looked at me and said, "You're not shaking anymore." She was right. I wasn't. Fear had burned off. What was left was focus. When Tessa filed the counterclaim, she didn't notify my family first. They found out the same way I had. Through a message. Caleb texted me at 6:32 a.m. "What the hell did you do?" I didn't respond. At 6:35, my mother called. I didn't answer. At 6:38, my father left a voicemail. His voice was no longer calm. "This is unnecessary," he said. "You're going too far. Too far." The phrase that had kept me small my entire life. I forwarded the voicemail to Tessa. She replied with one line, "Good." By the time the court date was set, the story had shifted. Not publicly yet, but structurally. They were no longer the aggrieved family. They were defendants with paper trails. The night before the hearing, I stood alone in the cabin kitchen, the lights off except for the glow over the sink. I rinsed a mug and set it in the rack. The click of ceramic on metal echoed in the quiet. For the first time since this started, I slept through the night. Not because I believed in justice, but because I had finally stopped waiting for permission to protect myself. The morning came clean and sharp. And when I locked the door behind me, keys heavy in my hand, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. They had taught me how to endure. I was about to teach them what it meant to lose. The courthouse smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner. I noticed that first. Not the flags, not the seal on the wall, the smell. It reminded me of libraries and places where things were recorded whether people liked it or not. I arrived early. Navy suit, flat shoes, hair pulled back so tight it made my temples ache. I carried nothing but my phone and a slim folder Tessa had already memorized. She was waiting by the defense table, sleeves rolled once watch face catching the fluorescent light. "You good?" she asked. "I'm clear," I said. She nodded. That was enough. Across the aisle, my family sat together like a unit. Dad, rigid hands folded. Mom clutching tissues she hadn't used yet. Caleb in a borrowed jacket, foot-bouncing eyes darting like he was already losing control of the room. He didn't look at me. That hurt less than I expected. At exactly 9 o'clock, the bailiff called the room to order. Judge Marisol Vega entered without ceremony. Mid-50s, sharp eyes, no patience baked into her posture. She sat. We all sat. Caleb's lawyer stood first. He talked about family, about promises, about how painful it was when money came between blood. He never once explained how I'd supposedly taken something that wasn't mine. He didn't need to. He thought the story was enough. When he finished, Tessa stood. She didn't smile. "Your Honor," she said, "this case is not about hurt feelings. It's about coordinated deception." She didn't pace. She didn't raise her voice. She started with dates, the attempted account access, the social media posts timed within minutes of private refusals, the sheriff's report from the night my brother occupied property he did not own. Then she introduced the documents, bank records, custodial fund statements, copies of checks written to me that were never delivered. Judge Vega leaned forward. "Who intercepted these?" she asked. Tessa didn't look at my parents when she answered. "The trustees," she said. "The plaintiffs." The room shifted. Elaine Porter took the stand next. Small woman, steady voice. She held the copies of my grandmother's letters like they weighed something. She explained how funds were sent, how she was told they were received, how she later learned they were not. My mother stared straight ahead. Caleb's lawyer tried to interrupt. Judge Vega stopped him with one raised finger. "No," she said. "Let her finish." When it was my turn, Tessa asked me simple questions. "Did you purchase the cabin with your own income?" "Yes." "Did you receive any inheritance funds used in that purchase?" "No." "Did you ever authorize your brother to access the property?" "No." She sat down. Caleb's lawyer stood again, sweating now. "Ms. Ellison," he said, "wouldn't it have been easier to just give your brother the cabin and preserve family harmony?" I didn't look at him. I looked at the judge. "No," I said. "Rewarding fraud isn't harmony. It's surrender." The silence that followed was complete. Judge Vega removed her glasses, cleaned them slowly, placed them back on her face. She didn't deliberate long. "This court finds that the plaintiff's claims are unsupported by fact or law," she said. "The property in question belongs solely to Brooke Ellison. Any assertion otherwise was knowingly false." Caleb's head dropped. My mother's tissue slipped from her hand and fell to the floor. Judge Vega continued. "The court further finds evidence of financial misrepresentation, interference, and public defamation. The defendant's counterclaims are granted." She named the penalties, the damages, the injunction ordering the harassment to stop immediately. It was over. The gavel came down once. Not loud, final. I stood. So did they. For the first time, my parents looked at me like I was real. I walked into the aisle and stopped, turned. "You chose him every time," I said quietly. "Today, I choose myself." I didn't wait for a response. Outside, the air was sharp and cold, the sky bright, unconcerned. Tessa stepped beside me. "It's done," she said. "No," I replied. "It's closed." 6 weeks later, the money hit my account. I didn't check it twice. Caleb lost his job after the ruling went public. The posts that once painted him as a victim became receipts people laughed at. My parents sold their house, downsized, drew their blinds. I didn't block their numbers. I just never answered again. That spring, I hosted a dinner at the cabin. Maya came first carrying a bag of groceries like it was sacred. Elaine arrived with a bottle of wine my grandmother used to like. Tessa showed up late, kicked off her shoes on the porch, and said she was officially off the clock. We ate on mismatched plates, laughed too loud, let the night stretch. At sunset, I stood on the porch and looked at the water, still and honest. No one could take this from me. Not because of the law, but because I finally understood something my family never did. Blood doesn't make people safe. Choice does. And the people standing behind me, laughing, arguing, alive, were the only proof of family I would ever need. I locked the door that night, not out of fear, out of peace.